A lot of cannabis brands think they're hot shit. I'm here to tell you, most of them ain't. And I'm gonna give you tangible takeaway points of how to improve the branding at your cannabis company. Ready? Go. We're gonna go over 4 mistakes that virtually every single cannabis company is making on the brand side of things. So we basically got 4 tips for you on how to improve your cannabis brand. Claybourn Cannabis Company is our case study for today. They are based in Paris, California, and they are one of the leading cannabis companies in California and expanding beyond that. So the first biggest, hairiest, and most obvious problem to me with virtually all cannabis companies is a lack of humanizing. There is not enough humanizing of cannabis brands in the industry across the board. What do I mean by humanizing? I mean that in several ways. That can be on your website. Who are the people that founded the company, running the company, operating what's happening behind closed doors and in front of you?
He starts monologuing.
There's a lot of improvement in the industry, right? Because there's been a massive injection to the legal industry. So there's lots of, tech improvements, yada, 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 yada.
So what the are you talking about?
But the big component that is so obvious in so many ways to me, but seems to always miss the mark, is humanizing that brand. And I understand why this happened. Basically, the industry was a black market. And so people did not want to put their face on their company or share who was running it. Legally, you didn't want to get in trouble, so no shit, you weren't going to show your face. But today, where there's a large legal industry, I think it's really important to put a face to name, a face to brand, humanize, show off the people and the passion behind your cannabis company. So how is Claybourn humanizing? Claybourn is doing a fascinating job of humanizing their brand. Where they're doing something that nobody else is doing is they have athletes that they have sponsored. They're humanizing their brand. They're showing the people that represent the cultures that they are tapping into. These dozen or so athletes are listed on their website as their team members. They're the face of their company, essentially. Basically, think about what Red Bull does with athletes and storytelling about athletes. And that's exactly what Claybourn is doing, but in the cannabis industry. It seems to be the second most important thing that's missing from cannabis companies, which is you are not niching down. So many cannabis companies are not niching down their audience. I don't even mean niching down your product. We'll get to that in a second. I mean niching down your audience. It's really difficult to just cast a wide net and capture everyone's attention. So you have to do it bit by bit, group by group, niche by niche. Without focusing on a niche audience, it's gonna be really difficult to get to that wide net version of your company that you wanna be at, where you have garnered the attention of everyone in the room, if you will. But if you don't start with a niche and you don't start with a subculture basically that you're targeting, you're probably gonna have a difficult time scaling. Claybourn, they've done a really great job of finding their niche. They've basically tapped into these black sheep alternative types of sports that aren't typically getting a lot of sponsorships, especially from cannabis companies. I mean, what industries are getting a ton of cannabis sponsors? Claybourn has done a really beautiful job of tapping into these very specific sports and artistries, making their brand known in those specific spaces. So they've tapped into bull riding, motorcycle racing, glass blowing, mixed martial arts. It's a blue ocean of opportunity to be a part of those communities. So the third mistake that cannabis companies are making that's making their branding suck is trying to do it all. Right? So we've been flirting around this topic a little bit by saying to niche down your audience, but trying to do it all. And I mean this across the board, whether it be trying to do every single type of product, or trying to cast the widest possible net to just get the largest audience of all type of peoples. You can't do it all. Even companies like Amazon that do it all, hypothetically, right, and sell everything, they started out by just selling books. They were a bookstore, right? They niched down hard. They did that well. They bought a bunch of Google AdWords before most people knew what they were. And then they were off to the races and they were able to scale and cast a wide net. But they started on a niche. They started by not doing it all. Claybourn is a great example of not trying to do it all because they don't make all these different products. They don't have edibles. They don't even have vapes, actually, now that I think about it. They literally just make pre-rolls and they grow flower. They grow flower and they make pre-rolls. Pre-rolls and flower. And you have to respect that because there's lots of pre-roll companies that don't grow their own flower. So that's a huge plus. They're just doing two things really, really well. Okay, now the fourth and final mistake that most cannabis companies are not doing. There is some good examples out there, but better storytelling. Most cannabis companies are missing the mark on storytelling. Now there's lots of different ways to storytell. I'm biased, I'm a fan of unscripted storytelling. That's what I specialize in, right? Documentary storytelling. So for me, that's where there's a huge missing opportunity in the cannabis space that most cannabis companies have not tapped into, which is just telling true unscripted stories about their business, about their customers, about their products, about what they're doing to the world, the positive impact they're making on the planet to the people in the world. You share those stories, you storytell more, people relate to it, people relate to people. It just improves the branding the more you tell stories, the more you talk about what you're doing, documenting what you're doing. How do you communicate what you're doing without storytelling? You can't. So your mission, your company, it doesn't exist without a story. So write your own history and tell your story. So Claybourn, they do a really beautiful job of storytelling, actually. Funny enough, they tell short documentaries. I haven't even ever told a short documentary for them, so this isn't even coming from me. They are doing it on their own accord. They have their athletes that they've sponsored, right? So they're humanizing their company, and they have a face to brand. And then they take those athletes and they tell their stories and they share the passion that they have for cannabis and why it is meaningful to them. And it gives you a little bit of insight to what those athletes and artists are really like, and you grow to love them a little bit more, you connect with them a little bit deeper, and your subconscious love for the brand of Claybourn deepens that much more. You gotta storytell, you gotta humanize your brand. You gotta niche down and not try to do it all. Storytell about people. Make things that are meaningful. Tell meaningful stories and watch your brand transform and watch people fall in love with it.